Bienvenidos, welcome, bienvenidos to our first Vision Zero Challenge webinar session 2021. We are super excited to start the webinars this year. Thank you very much for being here with us today. For today's webinar session, we are going to see and we're going to talk about road safety in Sweden and policy innovation. We would like to say hello and a warm welcome to all the 24 cities of the Vision Zero Challenge. We come from Peru, Brazil, Argentina, Colombia, Mexico, Bolivia, Uruguay, Costa Rica, Salvador. I mean, it's from the really big south to the north and Mexico. So welcome to all of our cities. Welcome to all of those other cities and countries that are not here in this 24 cities. We give you a warm welcome to this first webinar session. We would also like to acknowledge our partners who are fundamental to the Vision Zero Challenge experience. To all of our partners, thank you very much. As always, it's been a great pleasure to work with all of you. And to our sponsors, with their great generous support, help make this happen. 3M, PTV Group, and Volvo Group, thank you very much. And as we want this to be a space for conversations and a space for us to interchange experiences and ideas, we encourage you to use the chat box to write your questions, your ideas, your comments, anything you would like. You can do them in Spanish, in Portuguese, or in English. Our team will translate them so our expert knows what you're asking and everybody can know exactly what your ideas are. Just a quick reminder and just a little detail. Once you write your question or your idea, please make sure you change the function to all panelists and attendees. This way, all the ones that are here today are able to see exactly what your ideas are and we can comment on them. And to jump into today's session, it is a great pleasure to introduce Dr. Matsike Bilin. Dr. Bilin has more than 30 years of experience with policy and safety, collaborations and strategies, and has served as a policy advisor, supporting Vision Zero around the world. Also, Dr. Bilin makes part of the Vision Zero Academy, one of our great partners for the Vision Zero Challenge, and it's an honor to have you here today with us. It's a great pleasure to have you here. We thank you so much for your time and thank you so much for sharing your knowledge. Dr. Bilin, welcome.
Thank you, Jessica, for that kind introduction. So let me start off to share my screen here and hopefully you will see it. Can you see my screen now?
Yes.
Perfect. All right. So I would basically today I will talk about two things. The first thing is, and maybe the most important, is about Vision Zero. And for us who working with Vision Zero is a policy innovation, and it's next year Sweden will celebrate the 25th anniversary with Vision Zero, because Vision Zero was adopted by the Swedish Parliament in 1997. But before we get into Vision Zero, I need to go back a little bit historically, because Vision Zero is not just come from the blue. Sweden have a long tradition of working with road safety, and I think it's important to get that background to understand why we are doing things a little bit differently than we used to do historically. So that's two parts in my presentation today. Will be the first one about the history, the second one about Vision Zero. But before I start with the history, I would like to put that also into a more theoretical kind of context here. And I guess I have to put this question a little bit rhetorically now, and that's the pity thing with this digital webinars is sometimes a little bit difficult to get a dialogue. But if someone would like to answer this question, please do that in the chat. So my question will be first: do you know what this is? If you don't read the text behind below. Yeah, so this is Chernobyl in the former Soviet Union, the Chernobyl nuclear power station, and this event was very important from many different perspectives, and of course when they did in-depth studies of this event, it turned out that there were huge technical deficits in this power plant, and that was the cause of this accident. But the interesting thing with this event was also that this is the first time when we really started talking about safety culture. And this event triggered lots of research about safety culture, and the things that we know about safety culture is actually research that have been developed since this event. And what we have learned from that is that safety culture is not something we have or not. It's not a binary concept. It seems that we evolve in different stages. Is more an evolution of the culture, and you can put that on an organization, or you can probably put it on a nation, and you can put it on a sector. And I use that that research to try to understand a little bit about road safety, actually. So I put that culture ladder from a more societal context and try to understand what a good road safety culture is. And the first step in this ladder is the pathological step. And that step is when you don't care, really. If you have fatalities and serious injuries in your country, you see that there's something that it's up to every individual to do the best to survive in a very harsh environment. And the next step is when a society become not happy about the situation. They think it's a problem. If you have fatalities or a serious injury, or if crashes occur, you want to do something about it, but you become very reactive. And this is a typical step for politicians. They are usually in their societies, they are quite reactive, and they want something to happen when instantly after something have happened. And unfortunately, that kind of step is usually not so long-term sustainable. You get that reaction with a campaign or some kind of short-term interventions, but you don't create a long-term sustainable road safety work from that perspective in the reactive phase. And the third phase is when you become much more systematically, and you start to deal with your problem more systematically. You set up standards, regulation, you set up program, you create institutions and so on when it comes to road safety. And usually when you go from these more first phases into this yellow phase, then you can see whatever you measure, you will see usually a reduction of 30–50% of your problem. For example, fatalities in a country, and that is very good. It's no doubt about it. It's a very good step, and you start to work systematically. But fortunately, usually you get into a plateau where you don't see any more progress. So you're working systematically, but you don't see any progress. So the next step is when you become proactive, and you start to, for example, in this calculative phase, you're chasing your accident. It's very common that you work with black spots, for example, in intersection or in the roads and so on. You try to do something about these black spots. But when you get into a proactive approach, you don't have to wait for people killed and serious injury, because you know already that the way that you design and maintain and how you work with a system, you know what factors that is important from a safety point of view. So you don't have to wait for things to happen. You start to work much more proactively with safety, and you set up safety performance indicators rather than just chasing black spots or risk groups or whatever you're working with. And you're creating a continuously improvement of your problem. And then the last step is when you actually have a safe system. Then you have to maintain a safe system. And that's very difficult, actually, because you have to have everyone who is involved in your system to thinking about safety all the time. So it's very difficult to maintain a system in the long run. And bear this kind of road safety culture ladder. I would like to you to bear it in mind when I talking a little bit about the history about safe Sweden now, and you will see that policy like Vision Zero belongs to the last steps, I would say. Vision Zero is a very tough and very demanding policy. It's not just doing things business as usual. You have to really get much more mature when it comes to your safety culture to become more proactively and to maintain the safety in the system. Okay, so I think that is a good start on our discussion here. Road safety in Sweden before the World War II, when the cars was introduced in the Swedish society, that was in the beginning of 1900, people were very skeptical. And you can probably understand that, because when you start to motorize your society in a society where you used lots of horses and that sort of thing, they saw these things like something very bad, I would say, and it was only for the rich people. So the first car that was bought in Sweden in late 1800 was the king who bought the first car, for example. So it was really for the rich people. This so they were very against it. But step by step, we saw more and more cars, more and more trucks, more and more buses, and that sort of thing in our society. And very early they start to regulate this and set up special driving license regimes. The cars has to be race-rated. They were set up basic traffic safety rules like speed and alcohol and that sort of thing. And in 1934, in mid 1930s, we also started collecting data, official road traffic safety data, and the Swedish government also set up a special NGO for road safety already in 1934. So that was already in place before the World War II. But but the number of fatalities was increasing very dramatically the years before the World War II, as you can see on this slide. The blue one is the number of fatalities per 100,000 inhabitants, and the red one is showing the number of cars in our in use in Sweden. And as you can see, before the World War II, the number was increasing dramatically. But then due to the World War II, it was a very quick drop of fatalities. And that was, of course, due to less exposure because people we couldn't get petrol and that sort of thing. So it was a quite different situation. But after the World War II, the number of cars in use increased dramatically. And if the Swedish society before the war was skeptical against the cars and personal individual cars, then the politicians have changed their attitude to this, and they thought that this was a great idea. Everyone should afford a car. That was the kind of the political statement in that time. And Sweden was also fortunately not directly involved in the war, so we helped to rebuild the rest of the Europe, and we have steel companies and heavy industry that helped the rest of the Europe to rebuild. And Sweden earned lots of money in that time. And a large proportion of this money was actually invested into a road transport system, because we thought that the road transport system and the cars was the next step in our society. So we saw a strong economic growth, a strong increase of cars, but unfortunately we also saw a dramatic increase of fatalities per 100,000 inhabitants, and as you can see. So this was not a very good situation, and the politicians and the decision makers were a little bit disoriented in that time. They didn't know what to do about this problem. So they started to set up different inquiries to get into more in depth of this problem, try to come up with different interventions and so on. And we knew that the US and England and so on, they were a little bit ahead of us. So we knew what was coming, and we tried to learn from other countries to how to deal with this problem. And in that time, for example, we had free speed, or both urban and rural areas. But then in 56, we introduced special speed limits for urban areas, and as you can see, it was a little bit dropped there in this time, but then after that it increased again. And also in the 60s we had a special set up special speed limits during the holidays and so on. So there were lots of through reactive interventions, you could say, to try to combat this problem. But nothing really worked. So we the car just increased, and the number of fatalities was also increased. But then, and in that time, Sweden was driving on the left hand, and that was not so good for us because the rest of the Europe was driving on the right hand, and the car traffic started to become more and more internationally. So we knew that we have to do something in Sweden about this problem. And the politicians decided to go from left-hand traffic to right-hand traffic. And you can imagine to make that kind of reform, you have to have everybody on board. You can't just take that stepwise, everyone, you have to do it one day and you have to do it everywhere in the same time, and everyone has to know about it. And people were very skeptical about this. There were lots of political resistance to go from left hand to right hand because people thought that this will end up in a catastrophe from a road safety point of view. But as you can see, in 1967, the year that we went from left-hand traffic to right-hand traffic, the number of fatalities dropped dramatically that year. So that was fantastic. It was a very successful reform. And to organize that reform, you needed lots of collaboration between the police, the municipalities, the NGOs and so on. So they set up a group of people that working with this reform. So they start to work systematically and there were lots of campaigns and information to people and so on. And in the same time, in that time, the Minister of Transport, his name was Olof Palme. And I don't know if you have heard about Olof Palme, but he's probably one of our most famous prime minister internationally. And Olof Palme, he became the prime minister in Sweden, and he was shot dead in 1986. But he was very famous in the world. And Olof Palme, he was quite a character, I would say, and he was transport minister in that time, and he had, I would say, a little bit mixed feelings about US. He was very much against the Vietnam War, for example. And he was very outspoken about it. So the US even decided to take home their ambassador for a while from Sweden at that time. But Olof Palme was he knew a lot about US because he had studied there. So he also knew about things that happened in US during that time when it comes to road safety. And it was a guy there in US in mid 60s. His name is Ralph Nader, and he wrote the book Unsafe at Any Speed. And he started to challenge the vehicle industry in US, and he thought that they could do much more when it comes to safety. And all that pressure that he created eventually led to and set up a special agency for road safety, the National Highway Traffic Safety Agency in US. And so that was the first kind of lead agency on road safety in the world, I think. And Olof Palme, he took that idea. So after this left-hand, right-hand reform in 1967, he decided to set up a special agency for road safety in 1968. And as you can see on these figures now, the number of fatalities dropped very dramatically then during the 70s, and we were very successful. So we went from this more reactive phase to become very systematically when it comes to road safety. And we did lots of things during the 70s, introduced seatbelts law, helmet, and lots of things, and vehicle, road, and behavior and legislation, lots of things. But then in the 80s, the number of fatalities start to increase again, as you can see. And there were a sense among the politicians now that we are, again, losing our control. More traffic, more fatalities. So they need to take the next step. And one of the steps that they took was that they decided to close down this special agency for road safety and merge it into the Swedish Road Administration. And that happened in 1992. But you can also see that on this line diagram that the number of fatalities dropped very dramatically in the beginning of 1990. And I wish I could say that that was due to fantastic road safety work that was carrying out, but that was not the case. The reason why we had that that drop was due to a very severe economic recession in the Swedish society. And we know that economic recession is good for safety, at least in the short run, because usually in the recession you get less exposure in the traffic, especially less exposure among high risk groups. So therefore you get better safety. And I'm not sure, but at least in a country like Sweden, that is true. It might be different in other countries because we get different signals now when it comes to the pandemic, because that's what's happened in Sweden now during the pandemic. We have a very strong drop of fatalities, for example, but in other countries we have even an increase, and I think that is because the exposure changed somehow, and we get more vulnerable road users or something like that, and a higher speed among the cars that still are around. I'm not sure, but I think that nevertheless, this exposure is very important. And in the Swedish context, if you have an economic recession, that at least in the short run will be positive from a safety point of view. But so we knew that when things start to roll again, we were in a big problem actually, because we knew that the strategies that we have implemented so successful from the late 60s was not working well enough. So we have to come up with something new. And that is what I would say is Vison Zero. So now I will move on to the next phase in my presentation and talking a little bit more about Vison Zero as a policy. And so in 1997, the Vison Zero was adopted by the Swedish Parliament, and basically it's a kind of ethical imperative that says that it can never be ethical acceptable that people are killed or serious injuries when we're moving within the transport system. So I think that that's what most people refer to when they hear the word Vison Zero. It's a long-term goal to eliminate fatalities and serious injuries. But for us who work with this and been deeply involved in this, it's something much more than that. It's not just a long-term goal. It's also a different strategy when it comes to safety. And one way for me to explain this new strategy, Vison Zero, is to it is to compare it with a more traditional approach to road safety. And of course, we're still working, so will be a little bit black and white here, and we're still working a lot with this traditional approach, but it's definitely clear that we are moving into something quite different from this more traditional approach to road safety. And this traditional approach is very if I look internationally, this is the for many countries and many jurisdictions, this is the way that we think about road safety already still in our societies. So we haven't seen this transformation yet. But let me go through this traditional approach a little bit more in depth, and you probably will understand what I mean. So in this traditional approach, the problem that we try to solve is the problem with accident, or if you prefer, crashes. And we know from in-depth studies of accidents and crashes that 90% of all crashes here and now is due to human errors. 90%. That is a kind of mantra, you know. It's been there since the introduction of the cars in our society. So when I go back in history in Sweden and read some of the reports from when we introduced the cars in our society, I find this kind of odd way to explain the problem, like 90% of all crashes is due to human factors. So therefore, we have put the ultimately responsibility on safety is put on us as individuals. So if something goes wrong out there, you can always find some individual to blame. And our strategies has been focused on try to creating a perfect human being who always doing the right thing through regulation, enforcement, education, and information, and so on. So we try to modify people's behavior to something that we think that we get the perfect human being who always doing the right thing. And this kind of traditional approach is also based on the idea that people don't want safety. So we have to come a little bit from the above and push and force people to safety. And we don't think that we can really solve this problem. So we are quite happy if we can step by step reduce the risks. And although we are not so explicit about it, we think that there is a kind of optimum of fatalities and serious injuries. It's a kind of price that we have to pay for our mobility. And Vision Zero as a policy challenge all these aspects now. And the first thing is that the problem that we try to solve in the Vision Zero framework, that's not the accident per se. The problem that we try to solve is that people get killed and serious injuries. That is our problem. And according to Vision Zero, the reason why people get killed and serious injuries in traffic is because people are people. We have young people, we have old people, we have all kinds of people now on the daily basis who are using our road transport system, and they will make mistakes. So we can't exclude some people. For example, in the aviation, they excluding those who they don't think can become a pilot. And that was the idea in 2030s. That was the idea that we should exclude a large proportion of the people should not using the road transport system. But nowadays it's a mass transport system. Everyone is using it every day, and they will make mistakes. So instead of hoping that we can somehow modify these people's behavior to become the perfect human being all the time, we have to accommodate for that people will make mistakes. And humans are fragile. We have a certain tolerance against external violence. And this kinetic energy is the core thing to control. Control for harmful energy, that is what is the core in a approach like Vision Zero. So now to just refer to this pandemic now, our virus, our COVID-19, that is kinetic energy. That is what we try to control in a road safety work. It's not the accident per se, it's this kinetic energy, the harmful kinetic energy. So let me take a few examples on how these different mindset have an impact on the way that we try to solve our problems. If you have a typical 4-lane intersection across crossroads, the traditional approach to solve crashes in that intersection is to put up a traffic light. And when you do that, the number of crashes will definitely be reduced in that intersections. But those who will happen will be very severe, because the typical scenario is that someone by mistake go against this red light, and due to the high speed and the high kinetic energy, the outcome will be very severe. But if you make a roundabout, the number of accidents might increase a little bit because it becomes a little bit more difficult to drive in a roundabout, but those who will happen will be less severe. And a traffic light or a roundabout might actually be the difference between life and death. So therefore, in a Vision Zero framework and context, the ultimately responsibility for safety is put on us as system designers. Of course, the individual road users still have a responsibility, but if something goes wrong and they don't comply with the regulation, and so on, it goes back to us as systems designers. We have to start to continuously improve our system to accommodate for people's mistakes and so on. So it starts, and the responsibility for safety starts and ends with the system designers. So let me take another example just to highlight the different ideas about how to solve problems, because this is kind of philosophy, you know, and it's have a great impact on the way that we think that we can solve problems. Let's us talk about drink and driving. Sweden, we have a long tradition of working with drink and driving, and actually already in 1940, Sweden set up a special threshold for how much alcohol you are allowed to have in your blood when you're driving a car. And in that time, they set that threshold to 0.08. It was actually Swedish doctors who came up with a method to measure the alcohol concentration in the blood, so we could do that. And then we have changed that from 0.08 to 0.05, and now it's 0.02. That's the threshold now. And we also have lots of campaigns, education in schools, and we have very tough sanctions. If you be catched by drink and driving, you could end up in the jail. So there are very tough sanctions if if the police catch you. And we also have random breath controls. So the police is allowed to stop anyone, anywhere, anytime to check if they have alcohol in their makes a random breath control. So that makes it very effective to to prevent people from drink and driving. And we have been very successful with this, I would say. So if you make random breath control, then the police will find that 99.8% of the traffic that they stop is sober. So it's only 2 per 1,000 that drink and driving in Sweden. So that is fantastic, you know. It's fantastic, 99.8. So we don't have a social norm problem when it comes to drink and driving in Sweden. But when we make our in-depth studies of fatal crashes, we still have 25% of all fatal crashes is influenced by alcohol, alcohol-related crashes. So we don't have a social norm problem, but we have a safety problem. So therefore, I used to say, and I will show you a little bit later, that probably one of our most effective countermeasure now for preventing alcohol-related crashes is a middle barrier. Because a middle barrier don't care if you are influenced by alcohol, drugs, if you are fatigued or you are distracted. It will only prevent you from killing yourself or someone else. So that's the thing with this Vison Zero. We focus on preventing fatalities and serious injuries. Sometimes we have to accept crashes, but we don't have to accept the negative consequences. So that's a very good example on how Vison Zero in practice work. And of course, we can't put up this middle barrier or do something about the traffic environment in a different way. So we think and we push very hard for solving this problem with vehicle technology. So we think that in the future, you will have some kind of device in your car, and this device will be as common as a seatbelt that will prevent you from drink and driving, for example. So it's the same old problem, behavior problem, but it's a different way to solve that problem, a different idea how to solve this problem. And Vison Zero is also based on the idea that people want safety. If you ask people, individuals, how many fatalities do they accept in their family and so on, they will say 0. So there is a huge demand for safety, actually. When we make the options clear for people, the safety options, we can see that they have a dramatical impact on how people want. For example, Sweden and Europe, we have worked with this Euro NCAP. It's a car assessment program where we set up special. If you have a very safe car in these tests, assessments, you get 5-star. If it's a very bad car, you get maybe 1 star. And historically, people don't understand. They can't see from the outside if this is a safe car or an unsafe car. When we deliver that kind of information to consumer, we see how the market changed dramatically. At least in Sweden. So people don't want a 1-star car, they want a 5-star car, for example. And of course, in the long run, we would like to eliminate fatalities and serious injuries. And that is what most people think about when they think about Vison Zero. But as you can see, it's a paradigm shift in the way that we think about safety and how we would like to solve safety problems in the future. And this is actually what the Swedish Parliament adopted in 1997. But you all know that policy is a policy. It's a different story to go from a policy to practice and into implementation. But fortunately, we have been able to do that in Sweden. We have lots of different things that we have done now that is based on this Vison Zero. So I will go through some of these examples. And I would say it started in the urban areas. And this curve is actually the scientific kind of base for Vison Zero. That shows the risk of get killed if you get hit by a car as a unprotected road user. And basically it says that if you get hit by a car in 50 kilometers, the risk is more than 80%. If you get hit by a car in 30 kilometers, the risk is less than 10%. It's a huge difference between 30, 40, 50 or 60 or whatever. And you have this very dramatically risk curve. And you have the same when it comes to other type of crashes, for example, car-to-car crashes and so on. You have similar kind of risk curves there. But as an individual, you don't understand this. You don't understand that if I drive 30 or 35 or 40 or 50, that has a dramatic impact, that this kinetic energy have look like this. You don't have any perception of it. We can't understand this. We can drive you 30, 40 or 50 or 60. We don't have any perception of kinetic energy. So therefore, when we are see an environment like this, we are, at least we have a sidewalk and we have this zebra crossing and so on. But Sweden, since 1956, we used to allow the default speed in this environment is 50 kilometers. And that means that if a car driver or pedestrians make a mistake on the zebra crossing here, that could end up in a total catastrophe. And the whole safety has been put on these individuals to negotiate about, but they don't have any perception that this is a very dangerous spot. And the traffic engineers, they used to give this zebra crossing everywhere, but it turned out that this is a very dangerous part in our road transport system, and it's a conflict zone between unprotected and protected road users. But if we could understand, if we saw this kinetic energy, if we had a perception of this, there are things in our environment that we understand from a risk perspective. For example, we understand risk with spiders, we understand risk with snakes, and we also understand, have a good perception of the risk with height, for example. And that's things that we have as humans evolutionary. We have got that with us for many thousands years, and maybe in the future we will also have more and more perception of kinetic energy. I'm not sure. But if we could understand kinetic energy just like we understand heights and the energy with heights, we will perceive the situation like this. And you can imagine the zebra crossing. That is nothing that you would like to have your children to go on a daily basis here, in 50 kilometers, because it's a very dangerous part in the system. So you have to do something about the kinetic energy. You can't start to blend unprotected and protect road user in speeds like 50 kilometers. It's impossible. You can't creating a safe system from that perspective. And when we started to share this knowledge and this information with the traffic engineers around Sweden in the late 90s, we can see the results now. You will see lots of speed bump, lots of special areas with 30 kilometers. You will see lots of separation from unprotected from protected road user, like a special cycle lane. You will see lots of traffic calming solutions, special areas where you give priority to unprotected road users, and roundabouts, small roundabouts, for example. And everything of this is actually to control this harmful energy. That is what these interventions doing. So if you go back now, let's say 20, 30 years in the municipalities in Sweden, and now go back there again today, you will see it. They have done lots of different things when it comes to the design of the urban area, and they put the unprotected road user and their safety as top priority, number one. And that has lately become a very important thing, because we see that we need more cycling, we need more walking, because we have also other challenges in our society with climate change and so on. And safety is actually one of the barriers to make that happen, to make people cycling and walking and so on. So we have to work with safety to make it easier for them to do that without threatening their life, for example. So there you see there is an relation between other sustainable challenges, and safety need to become more integrated in the way that we're working with this sort of thing. But the Vision Zero in Sweden, it's not only a policy for the urban area, it's also a policy for the whole nation and from the rural area. And we used to have these type of roads. They are 30-meter wide, and we are allowed 110 kilometers on this road. And if you calculate the number of crashes per kilometer driven on this road, our experts, traffic engineering experts, they will say that this is a safe road. But if you ask the people, the citizens, they will say that this was death roads. Although there were not so many crashes on this because they are quite easy to drive on, those who will happen here will end up in a catastrophe. And typical scenario is that someone make an overtake and then end up in a head-on collision, and due to the high speed, the outcome will be very severe. And the way that we try to solve this problem historically is to get the police to enforce these roads and the speed, and teach the drivers how to make safe overtakes and so on. But to be honest, it didn't work. At least it didn't will not be able to have a safe system with that kind of approach. So we came up with a new solution, and I mentioned that before earlier for you, and it's these 2+1 roads. And sometimes you have 2 lanes in one direction, so you can make a safe overtake of that truck, for example, and then you will have 1 lane. And then after a kilometer, then will have 2 lanes again. So you it's alternative. 2. Sometimes you have 2 lanes, sometimes you have 1 lane. But the most important is this middle barrier. So the difference in safety between this more traditional approach road and this 2+1 road is that we cut the number with about 80%, 80-90% reduction of fatal and serious crashes on this type of road, I would say. So it works very, very good, and it's very good example, concrete example on Vision Zero in practice, I would say. And when we started this in late 90s, we had 0 kilometers with these roads, and now we have more than 3,000 kilometers with 2+1 roads. And we also have one of the largest per population, one of the largest, we don't call them speed camera, we call them traffic safety camera program in the world. But we're doing in a different way than most countries, but I can't get into a detail there. We don't catch people in our, we work with our cameras like more nudging people to keep them the speed, and it works very well, I would say, but I haven't time to go into details there. So to just summarize a little bit then, we have done lots of things in the urban area, and it's about controlling for kinetic energy and the speed. And we have done things in the rural area with these barriers and the safety cameras, for example. We promote and push a lot when it comes to vehicle technology. We think that there are lots of very promising technology, not only for the vehicles, but also for unprotected road users. And we have to take advantages of that new digitalization and this new technology. But to make that happen, the safety community needs to be involved in this now, because otherwise they will these engineers, they will come up with things that we don't have too much support of. So it's important that safety become part of this. And in the as I said, because Vison Zero is about controlling for harmful energy, the speed limits and the way that we set the speed and how we define it, the speed limits it's very important, because that is where we combine the design of the road and the vehicle and the kinetic energy. So we have started to change our speed limits all over the way, all over the system, from urban area to high speed areas, to make sure that we're setting the speed according to humans' tolerance against kinetic energy. So that is also one very important part of our program that we have implemented, I would say. So when we started this journey, we had Sweden was already, in that time, we had one of the safest road transport system in the world. We had about 7 fatalities per 100,000 inhabitants. And people thought that it's not possible for a top performance country to make it better. But we have shown now, because we have went from 7 to less than 2 fatalities per 100,000 inhabitants. So we have shown that even a top performance country can reduce the number of fatalities with more than 50%. So and we are not we are proud but not satisfied with our situation. So now we aim for the next step in our strategies for 2030 and focus on reducing the number again with 50%. So we are step by step going in that direction here. But you can also see that during from 2010 here, there is a kind of slightly a plateau here, you know, and it's and there were lots of huge, big changes of the governmental structure in Sweden in 2009 and 2010 that had an impact on this. So I will take next one to show you. So some of my experience here that, yeah, we have been very successful, but the process to strive for a safe system requires multi-sectorial efforts among multi-goal organizations. So it's not enough with only one organization. There are many stakeholders that needs to be part of working with road safety. But to make sure this happen, because things will not happen by itself. And I think that have been shown now the latest years here, that you need some kind of lead agency, you need some kind of facilitator that promotes safety and push these things forward. And there are lots of discussion about culture shift. And when I hear from US, for example, they're talking a lot about the culture shift among the citizens and the road users. But my experience is that in the process that I've been involved in has more been focused on a culture shift among system designers, we as professionals, and we need to make road authorities, road engineers, car industry, the transport industry, they need to be much more involved in road safety and become more responsible to be able to deliver a safety to consumers and citizens. So Vision Zero is focused on a different perspective on responsibility, I would say then. And to make that happen, we also have to expand our toolbox beyond regulation and bureaucracy, because that's have also been shown that that's not enough. With this traffic safety agency, for example, that we set up in late 60s, it helped us on the way, but we have to continuously improve our strategies, and we have to develop our toolbox when it comes to influence this system designer and get them involved in road safety and creating partnerships and so on. And the interesting thing now is that when we started this journey in late 90s in Sweden, we now see how this idea started spreading around the world. You will find it in the UN Global Decade of Action. You will find it in European White Paper for Transport. OECD have made a report, and the World Road Association, they refer to this Vision Zero. And some of our colleagues around the world, they using different name for it. They call it Safe System or Road to Zero. And although there are similarities, there are also differences between different aspects. So that's, you have to be aware about it. So this Swedish Vision Zero might not be completely in line with what they work with in Australia, for example, because there have been adjustments now when it comes to these different approaches. And you also will find it in World Health Organization and in New York and in Auckland and so on. And that's interesting. And now we can see that the first phase now is being very much high-income countries. The Scandinavian countries was very early on board when it comes to this philosophy and so on. But then the next phase, now we see more middle-income countries, cities and so on, that also start to thinking about this approach. All right, so I stop there, and then we will have some room for questions.
Yes, we have one question from Cindy Garcia from Bogota. The question is there any norm or condition in relation to land use that you identify as a remarkable norm to improve road safety?
So to put that a little bit in a little bit broader perspective, then, because I think it's a very good question, and it's a very good question because the road safety community usually they come in the end of a long process of that might end up in a crash, and when it end up in the crash, they will focus more on the individual road user and what's have happened in that circumstance. But Vision Zero forced us to go much more upstream, to understand that some of the problem that we facing here is due to mistakes that we have done much earlier in the process, and that land use is an example on that. You know, that how we organize and how we plan our societies have a dramatic impact in the end of we will see fatalities or serious injuries. So road safety or safety and this kind of qualities need to be integrated in instruction and standards for the land use. And Sweden was actually start to do that already in the 70s. In the 70s, Sweden, the economic growth was really on the top in the late 60s. And people moved into their big cities, Stockholm and so on. It's not so big city, maybe from a Latin American perspective, but from a Scandinavian perspective, Stockholm is a big city, and people moved there, and we saw very fast urbanization and so on. And to handle that urbanization, the politicians decided to set up new new areas for people to live. And fortunately, when they did that, they decided that safety should be one of the core quality in these areas. So they started to separate the children, basically, and the unprotected road users from the cars. So these neighborhoods is very green. They are very family friendly. They are very cycling friendly and so on. And that is very good that they thought about these things already in the 70s. So in this land use, it's very important to think about this kind of thing, and it's very much about how to separate and also less exposure, that you don't have to travel so much and so on. So yeah.
Thanks for answering. We have another question from Arles Arias from Medellin, Colombia also. And the question is, how to align various sectors, such as authorities, companies, and the community in general, with this zero vision approach?
I didn't get the question really. How to work multi-sectorially. Yeah. Okay.
Exactly that.
No. That's that is very important, and you have to set up some kind of management system where you're working very deliberately with this kind of multi-sectoral approach. And that was what I said in the end of my presentation, that was something that we missed for a few years now, until 2016, when we had a renewed commitment for Vison Zero, and the government decided to give a task to us as a Swedish Transport Administration to become the lead agency. And so that's important, that you have someone in your society. I think it doesn't matter if it's in a local level, on the city level, or in the national level. You have to have some people who are dedicated to Vison Zero, a task for it. They don't have to have too much things to do themselves, because the main purposes with that kind of task force is to make others to do things. But they need to work together with different stakeholders, both public stakeholders, but also from business and NGOs and so on. And our experience in Sweden is that to do that, you need to not only have a long-term vision, that is important, and you have to set up that, but you also have to have intermediate targets. For example, we're working with 50% reduction every 10 years. And also you need safety performance indicators. So you're creating a system of Vison Zero vision, long-term strategy, a system with intermediate targets, and a system with safety performance indicators. And then you make sure that all of these stakeholders are aware of that system and what we expect from the police and what we expect from the business and so on. So you have to work very systematically, I think, with this thing. And that is also, I guess, when I see Sweden compare with other countries, I think we are quite good at that, actually, to work between different stakeholders and so on, and it's quite open culture to work together with others. And in some countries I see that there is a more kind of silo kind of perspective, and people don't want to really go out from their task and what they are set up to do and so on. But that's very crucial if you want to solve a problem like safety.
Thank you for your answer. We have more questions and a comment. First, I will read the questions from Aileen McCarthy from Washington, D.C. And the question is, can you talk a little more about how the changes after Chernobyl influenced Sweden in developing this Vison Zero?
After
Chernobyl, yeah, after Chernobyl.
Chernobyl, okay.
Yeah.
No. So the reason why I bring up this Chernobyl event is that it gives you a kind of theoretical framework, and hopefully you understand that when you're talking about safety culture, it's not you have it or you don't have it. It seems that it's more evolutionary in its concept. And what I tried to show in my presentation is that probably Sweden was in the first phases in 1930, 1940. Maybe we probably always been aware about the road safety problems, but never mind, somewhere there. And then we went to a more reactive phase where we start to react on problems that, for example, if we had a big bus crashes or whatever, then the politicians start to introduce things, and that is good because they feel some kind of responsibility. But unfortunately, when they do that, it's only short-term kind of intervention. It feels good, but it well might not be sustainable. It will be a campaign or whatever. But then in the late 60s, we started a more systematically approach to road safety, setting up target program, creating standards and so on. And that is very good when you start to work with safety, that you achieve that phase. But then when we adopted this Vison Zero in 1997, we are moving to the next phase. We are moving to a more proactively approach to road safety. And that's quite different from this more systematic approach, so to say. So now, if I try to assess Sweden from outside, I would say that we are in some parts of our system, we have a safety system, but in general, I would say that we are in the proactively phase now, and that creating a different kind of leadership and a different kind of way to working. It's not enough with a road safety program. You have to work much more proactively. It's not enough with black spots program. You have to work much more systematically, proactively with safety, I would say. And if I would take an example on a system where it's safe, I would say for passenger in a railway, in a train in Sweden, they are in a safe system because we don't have crashes in trains in Sweden. And for them in that sector, it's very much about maintain a safe railway system. So when they don't follow the standard and they start to what you call it, um, cut corners, then we see that creates problem from a safety point of view. So they need to maintain it. So that was the relation between the Chernobyl crash and accident and what I was talking about.
Thanks for your answer. We have another question from Richard Tang from Lima, Peru. And he asked if there are any safety measures with this Vison Zero philosophy developed for autonomous cars and for high-speed roads like Germany's Autobahn. So yeah, he will like to know how about autonomous cars, electric cars. Yeah.
So I must confess, when we started talking about this in the late 90s, it was quite visionary, a visionary for vision. But now we get more and more serious about it. And the reason why we're doing that is due to the technology improvements. So the whole digitalization now is very promising from a safety point of view. But we don't have to wait for a self-driving car, because there are lots of technology now that you need to implement in the cars to make them self-driving. So from a Vison Zero point of view, that's not it's not you don't have to get to the automated phases. If we are smart now, we make sure that some of this technology that is important from safety, that they are giving first priority. For example, intelligent speed adaptation systems. A new car now with sensors and that sort of thing might be possible to make sure that every car with this new technology will comply with the speed. And also the technology with the sensor and that sort of thing will also detect if there are something wrong with your driving. So it will feel, the car will feel if you are influenced by alcohol. It will feel if you are fatigued. It will have lots of knowledge. The car will have a lot of knowledge about your behavior actually, and that is that kind of technology that the safety community now need to be involved in this discussion or promote. Otherwise, I think that because it's too much discussion about automation and self-driving, but that's not the most important from a safety point of view. So we see that there are lots of technology that could be very promising from a safety point of view, and some of them are already out there on the market actually.
Thanks. We have another question from Luis Pablo de Montevideo, Uruguay. And he wants to know, and he make a comment, that in Uruguay they have an expansion of ASEAN motorcycles at a very low price. And he wants to know what short-term measures do you recommend for a problem that today involves more than 50% of fatalities with these motorcycles, ASEAN motorcycles?
Yeah. No, I know that part of our world now, you have lots of motorcycles, and And you definitely need to work both on the short term, on the long term. But let me just share an example from my my own experience here. I think it was 2 years ago. I was in Vietnam, in Hanoi, and coming from Sweden, you know, and when you come from the airport down to the city, the question I put myself is, what on earth are all these people doing on motorcycles? They have children on motorcycles, and everyone is going on these motorcycles. The good thing from a safety point of view is that everyone wearing a helmet, because that's one of the most important quick solution on some of the more dangerous injuries, the more severe injuries, so to say. But unfortunately, some of these motorcycle helmets is more or less useless because they are substandards, so they will not help if you have a crash with them. But you can see all these people using these helmets now. And WHO, for example, they are very proud of and the NGOs that they actually have pushed and pushed the government to make it mandatory with these helmets and so on. But from a Vison Zero point of view, we would say that the solution here is probably not there. It's just like as I've talked about this problem with land use, for example. We have to go much more upstream, and therefore we see that things like public transport become one of the solutions on these safety problems in the end. So we have to promote also public transport from a safety point of view, and probably make sure that there are other solutions for people to transport and choosing much more safe way to transport themselves instead of being forced to using this motorcycle. So that will be a top priority from I think from a Vison Zero point of view. But to have said that, I understand that you have a problem now, so you have to work also with that, you know, and it's the same kind of thing when it comes to motorcycles as when it comes to walking or cycling. These guys are unprotected road users. So you have to make sure that you work a lot with speed, I would say. Speed become a very crucial thing to work with when it comes to motorcycles. And also, there are promising technology here with anti-brake systems and so on. So there are also not interventions that really will creating a safe system, but at least will provide a more safer kind of use of motorcycles.
Thank you, Matt. We have more questions, like 4 questions more, but I think we need to close the webinar, but I will read the last one and maybe we can answer, well, by email the other questions arised. So Jessica Guailanos from Lima, Peru, she asked, is there information or studies that shows if the safe system approach has helped to reduce social inequalities in road safety? So yeah, the link.
Yeah, no, I think that is a very important topic actually, because I worked a lot with US, and in a Swedish context, that is an a non-issue, I would say, because we don't have that kind of discussion, and probably because we are in a society that um, that is very eco society, so to say. We don't from a Swedish context have that discussion so much, but I have come across that problem and discussion in the US, for example, and unfortunately, there I think that the discussion have going quite wrong actually, because in the traditional road safety work, one of the major interventions that you put in place is enforcement, for example. And in some cities in US now, they think that achieve Vision Zero is to have a very strong policing. And I would say that at least from a Vision Zero, Swedish Vision Zero perspective, it's opposite. You know, it's to creating a safe environment, and to create a safe environment is something that benefits everyone. It benefits children, it benefits though poor people, it benefits everyone. If you set up speed bumps, for example, that will be very good for crossing the roads and so on. You know, so for me, Vision Zero is actually going very much in hand with social justice also, because it's forced us to creating something good for all people, you know. But I know that in some cities in the US, at least, they think that Vision Zero is about very strong enforcement, and then you have all this problem with profiling and the Black community and so on. And then I think that they are totally disoriented of what at least the Swedish Vision Zero stands for, so to say. So that's why it's good to have this discussion about also how road safety and Vision Zero, how it is interrelated to all sustainable development goals, but definitely when it comes to social justice and so on.
Dr. Belin, thank you so much for your time, for your presentations, and for answering all of our questions. There's a ton more. We think we can take this conversation by email. It has been fascinating, this space. I think for all of us, we've learned so much. Just a quick reminder, we do have more webinars coming on. The next one is June 30th, 1 week from today, same time, and hope all of you can join us. It's going to be about governance and leadership and data-driven safety approaches related to Vision Zero. So a lot of the questions still there are going to come up in the next webinars. Truly thank you for all your time and for just giving us so much of your knowledge here today. To all of the participants, thanks for joining us and hope to see you next time. Have a great day.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you for having me. Bye-bye.